So welcome. This session is about VertiPaq Analyzer. In 20 minutes, I will try to show you what VertiPaq Analyzer is and how you can use it. As you will see, it's a library that is present in several products, and it's also a library that you can use if you are a developer. My name is Marco Russo. I am part of SQL BI. We produce content for DAX, data modeling, and other things that you can find on our website. And I am the author of the library of VertiPaq Analyzer that is currently used by DAX Studio, Tabular Editor, and potentially other tools, because it's an open source free library. Now, the purpose of VertiPaq Analyzer is to extract information about the data that you have in a tabular model. A tabular model could be an analysis services model, a Power Pivot model, or a Power BI model, right? So why do we need it? Well, there are many reasons. One is I want to know the size of the tables, the size of the columns. I want to know how to improve my model, reducing the size. I want to understand the reason why some measure is slow, so I need to know how many unique values I have in a column. Or I simply want to extract the documentation from a model in terms of the list of the measures, the tables I have, because the VPAX file that I can obtain is a product of this library that is a format that extracts from a model these statistical informations without extracting the data. So we can preserve the sensitive information that we might have in the library. This is the only slide. I have just a recap slide with a few links, but this is the only slide that I will show you because, of course, the rest of the time we will spend looking at the library and the products that use it. So let's start from a model. So let's start using it, and then we will explain what is behind the cover. This is a Power BI model, a Power BI report that has a few tables. This is the model. Simple model. We have sales, we have store, we have a currency exchange. Oh, sorry, I forgot to start. Give me 1 second. I forgot to start the zoom it, which is fundamental to do this operation. Like I want to zoom and want to show you. I have sales, I have other tables. And overall, how big this model is. If you don't have any other tool, you can just look at the size of the PBX file, or you can look at how many rows do you have in each table. And one by one, you go in the lower corner and you see how many rows you have in sales, 10 million, how many rows you have in the other tables, and so on. When you click a column, you can also see how many unique values you have in that column. These are the information that are out of the box available in Power BI. Now, if you install DAX Studio or Tabular Editor, these two tools, Tabular Editor 3 and DAX Studio, these two tools internally have the same engine, the same library, VertiPaq Analyzer, that can analyze this model. So if I launch DAX Studio, I have a button in the advanced part, in the advanced ribbon, where I can ask to view metrics. So VertiPaq Analyzer is the name of the library, but DAX Studio exposes this information like view metrics, right? So if I click on view metrics, what happens is that I see this new pane, which is called VertiPaq Analyzer Metrics, that shows the list of the tables I have in the model and the list of the columns for each table that I have in the model. So let's start to analyze what we have here. Then we will go back and I will explain you in detail what these columns are. For each table, I see how many rows I have in this table. I have this information from Power BI 2. But what is the size of this table? And if I go in summary, I can see the size of the entire PBX file, but not the PBX file on disk. I see the size in memory. Because when you open the PBX file, there could be some change, some difference between the size of the PBX file and the size of the model once you load the model in memory. In particular, there are, for example, the dictionary and other parts of the data that are more compressed in the PBX file and not compressed once you open the file. So you could see that this size is slightly bigger than the PBX file that you have on disk. Now, you see we have other information here. We will come back on this in a moment. When I open a table, I can see for each column how many unique values this column has. Cardinality is, for a table, the number of rows in the table. For a column, the number of unique values that you have in the column, which is an important information to understand whether the column is more or less expensive. As you see, because Power BI compresses data column by column, the size in bytes of each column is different. Even though we have 10 million rows in the same table, we have 78 megabytes just to store the column customer key, and we have only 4 kilobytes to store the column line number. We still have 10 million rows with the column line number, but it is highly compressed compared to other columns. What is the biggest driver to increase the size of the column? The cardinality. It's not a linear. As you see, we have many more unique values for cardinality here, but the size of this column is slightly smaller. There are explanations for that. We will go back on this later. But the idea is that, okay, this is the final result in a human-readable way of the library VertiPaq Analyzer. So I will spend more time on these numbers because I want to guide you in reading this number. Let me just explain what am I doing. So DAX Studio is using a library that performs this analysis, and this library can actually export this information that now we are looking at in a matrix, in a list, on a file, a VPAX file. So let's call this SQL bits. SQL bits. Okay, so I'm saving a file, VPAX file. Remember, this file is around 400 megabytes in memory, is around 300. The PBX file is 280 megabytes, if I remember well. But once I save this file, if I open the folder where I saved this file, you can see that this file is only 33 kilobytes. Why? This file only includes the statistical information about the tables I have, the columns I have, and so on. And this file is something that if I copy this file and I rename this file into a zip file, because the VPAX file is in reality is a zip file, you can open it. It's just a zip file with a few JSON files. And in this case, also with the model.bin file, which is the model, the tabular model exported as a bin file you could open in Tabular Editor. You are not forced to export all this information. I show you why. When you use DAX Studio has, I just have to remember where, advanced here. DAX Studio has the ability to enable or disable advanced features. Now I have everything enabled. I include the BIM file, which includes everything, all the measures, the entire definition of the model, and includes the statistics from the data. That is something that I might want to not include. These are statistics tell me something more about the, let's say, there are a few details that I will not obtain for free. So this required to query the model to actually do more deeper analysis about missing keys or the number of unique values in certain columns where the information provided by the tabular model will be not correct. So why should I disable these two? I could disable this because I don't want to export the model for some reason, or I could disable this because I don't want to wait too much, especially when you connect to a remote model, because you can connect DAX Studio through the XML endpoint. This read statistics from data actually requires more communication with the server. It takes more time, maybe a few seconds, not just immediate like we have seen. When it is local, it is very, very fast. Why am I showing you this? This file includes everything about the model. Indeed, I can receive this file by email. 33 kilobytes is easy. Imagine I received this file by email. So I go back here. This is my VPAX file. I can download, if I go to SQL BI tools, I can download an Excel file that is called VertiPaq Analyzer. The original, the 1.0 version was an Excel file. But this new version of the Excel file simply is an Excel file that has a macro that can import this JSON file, this VPAX file. So if I download and open this Excel file, you see a short list of instructions, but basically we have this ribbon, Open VertiPaq, that allows me to open the VertiPaq, keyboard, the VertiPaq file that I saved. And it takes a few seconds because the macro in Excel is not so fast, but at the end, this data is imported in a Power Pivot model that then I can browse in the Excel file. We will see that we have additional information here, including, for example, a list of all the DAX expressions we have in the entire model. Not just the measures, also the calculated columns, the calculated tables, row level security, the expression for the conditional format. Everything you have in the model will be visible in the list of the DAX expression. As you see, it's a little bit slow, but once I complete this, it's like having a sort of documentation of my model where I have a list of all the measures and all the elements. This summary provides me the data with the number of tables I have here, the number of columns, the number of measures, and when I click here, show me the list of the columns. This is the same information that you have seen in DAX Studio, but in Excel. Why in Excel? Because we have many more details here, and this is Excel. You want to sort in a different way, you want to change the font, you want to delete something, it's up to you. Okay, so I personally use this tool often simply to retrieve the information from a customer that cannot share the data of the model, but can share the structure of the model and the measure because he wants assistance to fix a measure or to fix a performance issue. And so this is what I can do. I can also click here and format the code so it is easier to read and nicer to read. So this is the consumer part of VertiPaq Analyzer. Okay, so VertiPaq Analyzer can be consumed this way with this Excel file. Now, if you are interested into the information that we have here, we have a documentation. The link to this website is in the slide that I will show you later. This is a documentation of the libraries and the information we have. The Excel metrics are all the columns that you have seen in Excel are described here. So we have a detailed description of the meaning of each column. I will show you something more in a couple of minutes. If you're a developer and you want to use the library to create this format or to read this format or to manipulate this format, you have everything here. Open source, .NET Core, you can use in any application. It is technically, it can be used also on Linux or on a Mac as a library. The problem is that there you don't have other elements, like, you know, Power BI doesn't work on a Mac, but this library is perfectly compatible. So, after this overall view about VertiPaq Analyzer, what are the important information we have here that we can use day by day? So, as you see, there is a visual representation of the cost, of the relative cost of each column compared to the other column. So this is the more expensive column in the model, and these are the other columns. You can immediately see, oh, this column is very expensive, but I need a customer key, so I want to keep it. Why this column is so expensive? Because we have more than 1 million customers with 10 million transactions. Order number, do I need it or not? It depends, right? But if I want to save almost 60 megabytes, I could just get rid of this column. But I need it. Okay, you have to keep it. But remember, we are spending, just for this column, we can see here, this column alone, just the order number, is 23% of the table and 13% of the entire database, just one column. You remove this column, you save space. So when you import all the columns, all the tables from a database, usually you have a big model. But when you open the model with VertiPaq Analyzer, you can, instead of removing everything, you can remove just those 3-4 columns that are, you know, consuming 80% of the memory, and you start with a smaller model. So this is a very simple thing that you can do, but something more is looking at the cost of each column. For example, here we can see that this column is, for example, 80 megabytes, but this column is 80 megabytes because 40 megabytes is for the dictionary. The dictionary is expensive. And the dictionary means that in certain conditions, we could change the encoding of the column. Usually, this is automatically done by the engine. There are a few rare cases where this could be changed. This is not the case because this column, customer key, is a column used in a relationship. Indeed, we have the relationships here, and the relationships are analyzed not looking at the size. The size is usually small. The size is in bytes in this case. But what is important in a relationship is the cardinality, how many unique values you have in that relationship. And why this information is important? Because when we have a relationship that has more than 1 million unique values, for sure that relationship is expensive. Every time you use that relationship, you might incur in some performance issue. Again, but I have so many data. Okay, but you can realize whether that relationship could be a problem or not. I'm not here to discuss how to solve the performance issue. I just want to give you an overview about the features of VertiPaq Analyzer. Now, sometimes it happens that a relationship has values on the many side that don't exist on the one side. Technically, a relationship that has this condition is called an invalid relationship. I mean, it's perfectly valid to have that relationship in reality. It works. But when you have this condition, all the values that are on the many side, they don't have a corresponding value on the one side, are connected to a new empty row, a blank row on the one side. If you want to know if this is a condition that exists, look at the violation and look at these two numbers. So let me go back here, because first of all, I want to show you that the date table that is here, you see, referential integrity violation is 1. There is one relationship that is violating the referential integrity. There are values on the many side that don't exist on the one side. How many? If you go in the relationship pane, you can see that there are 4,000 missing keys in this table. So there are 4,000 unique values in the table currency exchange that don't exist in the date table. And these 4,000 values affect 100,000 rows in this table. So there are 100,000 rows in currency exchange. Remember, currency exchange has 200,000 rows. So 50% of the rows have a date that don't exist in the date table. Is this a problem for your model or not? I don't know. But VertiPaq Analyzer gives you this information that you don't have out of the box in Power BI. And which are the values that are violating this referential integrity? You have a sample here. This is one of the information that you will lose if you disable risk statistic from data. In order to retrieve this sample, we have to query the model. This could be expensive, so we do this only if you enable the feature in DAX Studio. Usually it's useful, but if I'm connected to a large model remotely, maybe I disable it because I know that it is going to be expensive. So this is what is important for a relationship. This column 1 to m ratio is something very, is a very corner case. Basically, it's the ratio between the number of unique values and the number of rows you have, the number of unique values you have in a column and the number of rows you have in the entire table. This could be important in some particular case. In this case, for example, we know that the ratio between the number of unique customers and the number of rows in sales is 14%. There are conditions where this number could create a problem when it is below, I don't remember, 15 or 20% in a large table, but that's another story. It's a very corner case. This view is similar to what we have seen for tables. It is just that we don't have a group table column. Every column is at the same level. The name is table column. And the advantage is that you can just sort by column size or data or dictionary the entire list of tables. So you can immediately recognize when you have many tables and you want to figure out which is the column that is more expensive, regardless of the table, you go here. Otherwise, the other columns are the same that you have in table. Partitions is something that you will almost never see in Power BI Desktop. Because in Power BI Desktop, you cannot create partitions in Power BI Desktop. You might have partitions in Power BI Service, but you can connect the Studio through the XML endpoint, and you can see the number of partitions you have in the table, the number of segments. Every partition has at least one segment, so the number of segments is always greater than or equal to the number of partitions, and many other information. This information that you see here have been added recently and provide information about the temperature of the data in Power BI service. So it's always 0 for Power BI desktop, but if you connect to the service, you might see which parts of the tables are more frequently queried, because Microsoft used this information to keep data in memory or page data from memory to optimize the behavior of Power BI service. So I hope I gave you an overall overview of VertiPaq Analyzer. As I said, you can download the Excel file from the first link. You can refer to the documentation that explains column by column the meaning of the numbers that you see in the second link. Please provide the feedback at the link that you see at the bottom, or use the QR code. And thank you very much for attending. We are out of time, but if you have any question, I can answer. I don't know, do we have questions from the audience remotely? No questions? Okay, go. So this way we can get questions internally, but the connection, because like we have 20 minutes slot, we can shut down the session.